And of course, I think that we need to modernize our legal immigration system. Now let me tell you about our immigration system. This is the most generous country in the world when it comes to immigrants. 1 million people a year immigrate here legally. 1 million. No other country comes close to that figure. But the system needs to be modernized. It needs to take into account the opportunities that it creates for investors or for jobs, and also our visa process for tourism needs to be improved as well. Because tourism, now that you have a middle-class emerging from around the country, can leave millions of dollars in places all across this country. A little selfish being from Florida, I imagine. We have a couple places in Central Florida you may have heard of. One has a mouse. But I think all across the country we have the opportunity for business exchange as well. These are the elements, and there are other things that government can do. And they're being pioneered at the state levels. But the second part of it that we have to do is prepare our people. And that starts with what I believe is the family structure. We have to be clear with people that there are consequences to societal breakdown. And our government cannot do anything to undermine those institutions in society that have always been the ones that help strengthen our families. We must do everything we can to ensure that federal policy doesn't allow that to happen. We need a 21st century education system. I believe in early childhood education. I believe in 21st century curriculums that teach the kids what they need to learn and succeed in the 21st century. Your lieutenant governor is a leader in STEM education. We need more of that because that's where the world is going, to a knowledge-based economy that we're struggling to compete in. We're preparing our kids to compete with kids in Mississippi and Alabama when they're actually competing with kids in China and India. We must bring our standards up. I've talked about the other things, career education. Why have we stigmatized vocational education? Why have we stigmatized career education? There are kids that don't want to go to Harvard or Yale. They want to fix airplane engines. And it's a good paying job, and it's what God has given them the talent to do. We should be able to graduate kids from high school, not just with a diploma, but with an industry certification and a career like that. And of course, college affordability I touched upon, and adult education is important. Look, all these things matter. I'll conclude by saying that this frustration that's out there is real. From so many people on my side of the aisle, in my party, in the governor's party, I would venture to guess in the party of most of you that are here, a lot of frustration about the outcome of the election. I've heard people say things like, I'm not getting involved anymore. I'm just going to focus on my family and my community and leave politics to others. Others have suggested that maybe the American electorate has changed. That what people want from government now is they're just going to vote for whoever promises them more. I don't believe that's true. I can't believe that's true. Because if it's true, then the very nature of our country has changed forever. And that just can't happen. That cannot happen. I don't believe that's true. I really don't. I think that most people are like my parents. All they want is a job that pays them enough money so they can buy a house, take their kids on a trip every once in a while, do some things that they enjoy in life, and leave their kids better off than themselves. The problem is that those jobs aren't being created as fast as they once were. And too many of them don't have the skills to do the jobs that are being created. That's what they want. And I think that's who we still are as a people. I don't think that's changed. I think what's happened, unfortunately, is that there are those who have made promises to them, who have told them, you know, we have more government, a bigger government program that does this, or if you allowed us to tax one group of people more so we can pay for services for another group of people, to convince people maybe that's the solution to the problems. Here's the truth. Big government doesn't hurt the people, it doesn't help the people who are trying to make it. It hurts them. Everywhere and every time it's ever been tried, big government crushes the people that are trying to get ahead. The people who have made it, as the president calls them, the millionaires and billionaires and the big corporations. There's nothing wrong with those folks, but they can afford to deal with big government. They may not like it. They can hire the best lawyers in America. They can hire the best accountants. And if they really don't like the law, they can hire the best lobbyists in Washington to change the law. Let me tell you who can't deal with it. The small business owner who's trying to start a business out of the spare bedroom of their home. They can't afford to deal with the cost of complying with big government. Big government crushes people that are trying to make it. That's why throughout the history of the world, 6,000 years of recorded history, almost anyone that has ever lived was poor. Think about what I just said. In 6,000 years of recorded human history, almost every person that has ever lived has been poor and disenfranchised. We Americans, this is the exception, not the rule. What we have here has not been the human condition. And even in many parts of the world today, what we have is rare. And that's important because if America declines, There is nothing to take our place. There is no other country. There is no other organization. There is nothing to be what we are and once were. There is no other country to stand there. What country is going to serve as an inspiration to people all over the world that have been told their whole lives, you can't have freedom because you can't govern a country where people are allowed to express their opinions? Because we express our opinions. What hope is that for people around the world that are told, you can only do the job your father or your mother did? Because that's their station in life. But they can look to America and see someone just like them that have accomplished extraordinary things. If America declines, if the power of our example is dimmed, what takes its place? The answer is nothing takes its place. And your children and grandchildren will inherit not just a diminished country, they'll inherit a diminished world. Darker and harder, probably more violent than it's been in a long time. What's at stake here is not just our country. It's the way life is on this planet. That's worth fighting for. And what that means to me is that we need to do a better job of going out and convincing our fellow Americans who perhaps don't see things the way we do, that free enterprise and limited government is the best way forward for them. That free government and limited enterprise and limited government and free enterprise is the only system that has ever allowed people to climb out of the circumstances of their birth. It's the only economic system that's ever allowed a vibrant, widespread middle class to take root. And that's not going to be a hard argument for us to make, but we have to make it. And if we do, then I believe that you will see all across this country what you are seeing here. The ideas that made us an exceptional nation will continue. And our children will inherit what they deserve to inherit, what I inherited and you inherited, the single greatest nation in the history of all of mankind. And I'm just grateful that you gave me an opportunity to share this with you today. I haven't had a chance to speak other than in my home after the election. And even that's been limited. But I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity to address you on these topics today, because I feel so passionately that what's at stake here is truly generational. I don't see this just as a challenge. I see it as an extraordinary opportunity. As an opportunity for us, as a generation of Americans, to do our part and write our pages in the extraordinary history of this special place. Oftentimes people come to me all the time and say, thank you for what you're doing for our country. I feel guilty when you say that to me, because I want you to know that I can never do for this country what it has done for me. I don't know where I would be tonight if my parents had not come to America in 1956. But I doubt very seriously whether I would be in a place like this, speaking to a crowd like you. Perhaps I would be just like all people have been throughout 6,000 years of history. I would be doing like my father did. And there's nothing wrong with being a bartender at a banquet. But he did that so I could have the career, whatever it was, never pushed me into one career or another. And I believe there are millions of people that still want that for their children and grandchildren here in America. And our job is to make it easier for them to do that. And government can play a role in making that happen. Governor Branstad is an example of what government can do to help the middle class grow and a state be prosperous. And I pray God will give me the opportunity to be part of that as well in Washington, D.C. So thank you for the chance to speak to you on these topics.